Florida's Women in Energy Leadership Forum was launched to inform, inspire, motivate diverse talent to join the energy workforce by intentional recognition of current female energy leaders who contribute to growing Florida's economy and the purposeful sharing of their professional journeys. We are creating opportunity. Join me each week as we meet new leaders in energy and listen to their important roles in an industry that is vital to the country's future. Welcome, everyone. Well, today's show is even more special than every week because I get to introduce my new colleague here at Lila Jaber Consulting. Sarah Sims has become the Director of Government Affairs and our Client Relations Director with our group, and helping me put on a great forum every year related to Florida's Women in Energy Leadership Forum, and we practice what we preach. So you got to throw people into the fire. So today, Sarah on this show as we talk to the wonderful Manitia Moultrie. So Sarah, I'm turning it over to you today.
Thank you, Lila, and thank you for that introduction. I'm extremely happy and excited to be here, and thank you for throwing me into the fire. Welcome, Manitia. It's truly great to virtually see you again. Before we dive deeper into your truly impressive career, let's start with a brief introduction of yourself and what exactly you do at Golder.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for having me, and great to see you again. I am the environmental power sector leader for our U.S. operations at Golder, and I'm also a senior partner, and I've been there. August was 20 years.
Wow.
Moving on to 21 years, and I work with technical teams throughout the U.S. in developing projects to serve power clients. So on the technical side, I could be working with folks involved in air engineering, water engineering, stormwater management, siting power and transmission facilities, solar, as well as dealing with the coal ash industry, which has been very big of late. So working with them to develop client opportunities and then putting together the technical strategy to move those projects forward.
Wonderful. And, we've really looked forward to highlighting your career because, you begun with the State Department of Environmental Protection. You then transitioned to a privately owned utility company. And now ultimately, you said you've been with Golder for 20 years. Was that a calculated plan for your career? Or can you take us through, what brought you to where you are now?
So not so much calculated, and I'll talk about that a bit. I graduated from Florida State.
Go Noles. I'm also a Florida State grad.
Great. With a degree in biology and chemistry, and got out and looked for employment, of course. And I actually was interested in going into the medical or health field, but found that what it was called DER at the time, they had a position open for a biologist. So I applied, and some of the individuals in that department actually were connected with individuals I worked internships with the co-ops at Florida State. So they hired me. I was a biologist there and worked at Department of Environmental Protection for 6 years. I worked through different departments there, got involved in compliance, program management, traveling, doing inspections. It was a great opportunity. And during that time, made the decision that I wanted to go work for industry. And the calculated part is I did choose to go work for a utility industry. And the also calculated part is I was down doing a site visit in Pinellas County and decided that I wanted to move to this part of the state. So I did apply, ended up getting hired here at Florida Power at the time, which is now Duke Energy. And I worked there for 11 years. And through conversations and networking, someone at Golder Associates called and offered me a position, said, we certainly could use your help. And I moved over to Golder, and I've been there ever since.
Wonderful. And we're going to dive deeper into opportunities for women, especially, with engineering jobs. There definitely is a gender gap there. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into that later. But for now, let's focus on more of what you do at Golder. So your responsibility there is all over the U.S. power opportunities. How large is that section? Because I know Golder's a very large company, and kind of what you're over, what that encompasses.
So it's interesting. I have the opportunity to have three hats. I get to work on project teams in power and power related projects that could be 2 or 3 individuals, and delivering a technical document and negotiating for the power client. Usually in the Southeast. I've had projects in the Midwest and Northeast as well. Or I could be working on projects with teams that are scattered throughout the US. And our sector, so Golder is about 1,300 in the US, and we have probably about 200 to 250 people right now playing in the sector. When opportunities with coal ash, when the regulations all came through with that, I was sector leader at the time and reached over to those who were practicing in solid waste and the mining industry and brought their expertise over into the sector. So we've been very heavily involved in those types of projects as well. So working with individuals across the US on those types of technical teams is something we do as well. Absolutely. And then the other piece of my role as sector leader is helping our practitioners throughout the US get contracts. So I could be working with individuals or in any state, helping them to make presentations to clients, negotiating contracts, submitting proposals, writing proposals for technical work. So it varies in what I actually get involved in. Mostly power sector, although I have to admit I do have 2 projects that are not power related. And that's basically relying on my technical expertise, which is in water.
Okay, wonderful. So, that kind of transitions into my next question here. With the pandemic, especially you mentioned helping clients make presentations and maintaining those relationships. How has COVID impacted what you do? And does that fall into your responsibility as well, as far as, ensuring safety protocols are met, but also maintaining those business relationships?
So COVID certainly affected our business a bit. It was a little slow at first, in that I think we were all trying to navigate and figure out how we were going to manage what it is we do. And we all quickly, as everyone, learned the benefits of Teams and Zoom and other media that we can chat with our clients. And the other thing that happened is a lot of our clients continued to have regulatory requirements where they needed to have monitoring completed, surveys done, reports submitted to the agencies. There were executive orders that allowed some leeway, but all of that still needed to occur. So we have a very robust health and safety group that developed protocols for our individuals that were going out in the field and going out to meet with clients to make sure our protocols aligned with our clients' protocols. We had certain checks in place to make sure everyone was aware of health procedures. And the majority of us worked from home. I know in my office, we made the deal, we call it our work pod. There were a few of us that were going in periodically. And so we were able to adjust in that manner. For those clients that had certain monitoring requirements, we were able to actually pivot and offer monitoring using drones and different types of technology. Our audit team became very proactive. They actually put together procedures and technology so that they can do compliance audits and not have to actually be in the facility or only having one person in the facility. So there was a lot of shifting that was occurring to make it work, and it's now become the norm.
Absolutely. And isn't it crazy that here we are a year later? And I think it's really incredible how large companies have adapted so quickly. Do you think how efficient has work become now? Do you think that we'll go back to normalcy? Or do you think that, we'll stay meeting virtually and, kind of having those health guidelines in place?
That's an interesting question because I didn't talk about one of the roles that I have is I get the opportunity to network with my clients all the time. So I actually spend a lot of time traveling and meeting face to face and having conversations and wonderful dinners and conferences and making presentations. And a lot of us miss that a lot. Will that all occur again? I'm not sure. I think it'll be limited. I think we have all determined that we can certainly conduct business without all of the extra effort with traveling and all the costs associated with so much traveling. But I think there's still an important piece of that face-to-face human connection that we still need to have in our business. As far as offices, I'm sure you all have discussed it as well as we have. The office layouts will be different in the future, and there may be office sharing where and we've done this in our office without even it being formal, determining who's in the office on what days and just kind of transitioning that way.
Absolutely. So, I came back in because you're both FSU Knowles, and there's only so much of that I could take. Right? Manita, there is now, rightly so, perhaps overdue, some conversation and attention to environmental sustainability and environmental justice. Something you said with regard to your previous work in water makes me want to ask you, how involved are you with those conversations as it relates to location and operations and maybe even on the procurement side?
So one of the areas that I do get involved in is siting facilities, and that includes whether it's generation or transmission or operations facilities. And the demographics certainly play a part in siting facilities. We have always looked at census data and looked at demographics. What we did not probably do enough of, and you'll see that happening more now that environmental justice will start to be a policy that a lot of the companies that we're working with have in place, will be putting a bit more effort into delving into looking at those groups that are impacted by those projects, whether it's income issues, race issues, natural origin issues. We'll be looking at how they are impacted as a group when we're siting those facilities. And I think it'll be a formalized process to do so. Just like we site a facility and identify what our impacts are to T&E species, what our impacts are to wetlands, I'm sure there'll be a section on what our impacts are entitled environmental justice. And we'll have to lay out what our evaluation showed and what the impacts are. And that will probably be factored into the decision for approving or disapproving that project.
Yeah, are you seeing a little bit more emphasis in RFPs for that kind of thought leadership? We've gotten to the point years ago, probably now a decade ago, where companies, when they issue their request for proposals, there is a requirement that there's a partnership or at least an attempted partnership with minority-owned business, right? And I anticipate there will be a day, if it hasn't occurred already, where RFPs for design, build, construct, regardless of the substantive area, will include some conversation and requirement about where are you building, under what conditions, and on top of that, who are you partnering with to make this happen?
So I'm in the middle of two large proposals now, two large utility companies who have facilities in multiple states. And both of those have very strict requirements on partnering with small businesses or minority-owned businesses. They have percentages that they want us to meet. We are having to certify that we can meet. And so we do have to go out and find partners that meet that criteria to help the utilities meet that criteria. So we're seeing a lot of that. You mentioned a little bit about environmental justice. We're not necessarily seeing it as part of the RFP process, but certainly we're having conversations with utilities about some of the services that we can provide and what our approach is to incorporating that into projects.
And I think that that's a conversation that, hopefully continually is brought up within that process. Turning our attention to STEM-related careers, especially with your background, we continue to hear, this decline of women in the engineering field, and maybe a lack thereof of opportunity in education. What can you attribute to this issue, and do you think it's more of an issue more so for minority women?
I think it's not as, I will say it's not as bad as it was. It's gotten better.
Good.
I used to walk into a room and only see men, but now I at least see women. And so it's gotten a lot better in that sense. I've tried to understand the challenge. I think that it's a difficult field. The coursework is difficult, and individuals need to really be committed that that's an area they want to go in and practice and stay the course to get there. I don't think engineering comes off for women as something that's a popular career. I think sounding like going to be an attorney or being a doctor or some of those careers sound a bit more amenable to discussing your future. And I'm hoping we can get beyond that stigma. It's an interesting career. And when I talk to students about engineering, I'm able to talk about there's 20 different fields of engineering. Probably 15 of those work in the energy industry. So trying to get them to understand and look beyond what they know about careers and really look at some of the opportunities that they may be interested in and not realize, that would be beneficial for them.
Sure, absolutely. And, it is such a broad field. I mean, there's so many different specialties within engineering. What, in your opinion, do you think we need to do differently to encourage women to, show an interest and gain more knowledge about the field?
Well, certainly a lot of it starts early when they're
Sure.
in elementary school.
Sure.
And making sure they're not afraid of math and science and engineering and solving problems. And solving problems may mean staying up all night solving problems. And so I think there's a little bit of that goes into it. Also making individuals aware of the opportunities, again, as I mentioned. And it's not just stepping out. And I think this is what has happened. You step out, you get an engineering position, and you don't see how you can navigate the course to get to the next level because of the competition within the company you're with or the who's in those positions. And so individuals step back and then go do something else. Now that I've seen a lot of. I've seen a lot of women come out and they start out in the field and then they navigate and move into another area of either the company or another area altogether.
Sure. And, I think Lila is going to speak to this a little bit too, but, I think that having a mentor, is a great start to, facilitating that pathway for children and, as you go throughout your career.
It is. And the other part of all of that is I think things are a lot different now than they were when, say, I went into engineering and environmental science. I really wanted to pursue a career in engineering, and I really wanted to prove something to the men I was working with. I don't think a lot of the younger individuals have that kind of motivation. And they're driven by other needs. And then there's this whole discussion around work-life balance. Mm-hmm. That I think is something really, really, really important these days. And maybe COVID has helped us with that. And maybe that'll help us be able to balance and help balance some of those entering into the career as well. And making them feel like that this isn't something that will consume their life.
Absolutely. And I love that you touched on work-life balance. And I certainly, I think, unfortunately, under the circumstances, but COVID has helped in that way, showing us that we can work remote if we need to and, still get our work done and have a family. It's there is a balance, but, we can still have very, very successful careers.
Correct.
So in regards to specific work with utility companies, can you walk me through those different collaborations you have. So from start to finish, from design, build, permitting, legal. Can you walk us through some of those interactions you have with the utility companies?
Yes. So I'll talk about the types of projects that I enjoy the most, I guess. We worked with the companies when they are siting a location to build either a power plant, solar plant, transmission facility. So we help them site a location. And the first issue we're looking at is what is the impact of that facility on the environment? And the environment is broad. Sometimes we think of the environment as one of two issues. We probably have about, over 40 criteria that we look at when siting. And it's air, as I mentioned, water, waste, wetlands, T&E species, and everything in between that affects the habitat for all of those nuances. So the criteria is evaluated, we site the facility, we work with the utility company to put together the documentation that's submitted to the agency to get approval to get the permits. Now, permitting is one word, but permitting is something that could take years. Sure. And the funny part of permitting is I was offered a position to do permitting when I was at the utility, and the person that offered me the position, I said, "You mean come over and fill out an application? Why would I want to do that? That's not very challenging." And he said, "Well, come on over." And so 20, 30 years later, I'm still involved in permitting. But so there's the environmental piece of it at the regulatory agency. And the agency could be local, state, or federal. And then there are stakeholders that get involved in that. And I know you all had on last week individuals from Duke who are involved in communication and stakeholder engagement. So we work with them to develop the communications around helping to get those projects moved forward, not only through the agencies, but with the communities and other stakeholders that have a stake in the success of the project. After it's permitted, we worked with them to develop a compliance plan to move forward. We potentially would work with the engineering firm that would be involved in doing the construction. A lot of times our engineers actually supported the site layout, helped with stormwater management, helped with laying out the facility so that you can move traffic around, avoid wetlands, go for tortoises, all those things that come into play. Discharging surface water, making sure that you're not impacting water quality. There's just a host of items that get built into those permits. So then we would get pulled in a lot of times by the company that's going to do the construction because we know all those nuances and we would help them with compliance. Most of the work that we do actually gets involved with after the facility is actually constructed and operating. So environmental compliance for a facility is in perpetuity, it doesn't go away. So they are monitoring and reporting forever. As far as legal, the legal is involved from the beginning to the end, mainly with making sure our documentation, we dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, and dealt with all the regulatory issues that we need to deal with, and helping to make sure that we minimize risks for the project getting approved. And certainly legal gets involved when we're involved in stakeholder engagement to make sure that we have the correct communication plan and the correct talking points. So start to finish, our group stays involved and there are opportunities there.
It's interesting to me, Manita, when I hear you articulate all of the different places where you have to be on top of the communication. I think a significant lesson for our student viewers and listeners is that communication is a critical component of any career. So, you have to know how to build the relationships to get trust. You have to know how to communicate effectively to be an effective engineer in this space, right? So
it is. And the other piece that's important, and I just touched the surface of the regulatory piece, dealing with the local, state, and federal regulatory agencies. Mm-hmm. That is, I think that's a talent because they are there to do one job and they're there to focus on what it is they're doing, but you're trying to basically sell your product your project and navigate the regulations.
Right.
And communication and dealing with regulatory staff is the start of that communication piece. And as you probably know, because you've dealt with these types of projects, you can't sit everyone in front of a regulator.
No, and you don't want to.
No, not at all.
You don't want to. No. So, Sarah, you know what the consequence of doing a good job is?
I don't want to know.
So
No.
great job. Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
job. I'm glad you didn't mess that up, and we will expect you to do this more often. Thank you. Stick around. I'm going to get personal with Manita here, so don't go anywhere. So Manita, at the end of last year, you ready to get personal, Manita?
Sure.
Take a breath. Yeah. So at the end of last year, there was a little acquisition announced.
Oh,
yeah. You might know a little bit about that acquisition. Tell us all about it. Let's see. So WSP announced its intent to acquire Golder.
Yes.
So my question to you is, what does that mean for the employees, your business platform, and for Florida in particular? Because I know that, this is a Tampa-based company, right?
So I have to say that Golder is an employee-owned firm, and so we shareholders actually voted to accept the offer to be acquired by WSP. So that's the little nuance in there. That's what makes it a pleasant journey to be on right about now. But WSP is a global environmental consultant firm similar to us. We have about 7,000 worldwide. They have about the same amount, which means we'll be joining families and become 14,000, or give or take several 100,000. So that acquisition is supposed to be final in the next quarter. And we have not had a chance to have detailed conversations, but certainly it expands our footprint. We are heavily involved in environmental engineering and ground engineering mostly, and we work in various sectors. I'm power, but we're also involved in mining and transportation and oil and gas. WSP is a global consultancy firm, and they are, I think, more above ground. They get a lot more involved in infrastructure and public sector. And so there's not a lot of overlap. What we're seeing is that we will complement each other very well. And a lot of us who are working on large projects are looking forward to being able to pick up the phone to see who we can pull in to help us with those projects that we're working on where we need additional expertise or resources to assist. We're not there yet. We're just kind of peeking around the curtain to see who's there, what kind of opportunities they have, what do we have that we can give to them that we can't do because of our staff, and we'll see where it goes.
Sounds like a phenomenal opportunity. Really
Looking
is.
Forward to it.
I'm sure the devil is always in the details, and the integration will take some time, but it sounds like a wonderful opportunity for you to serve in a larger footprint and learn new people and create more opportunity for those industries that you serve. As I was listening to your conversation with Sarah, Manita, I was reminded, thinking to myself how you and I first met a few years ago now, and it was through our mutual friend Richard Zolak, who I have a lot of respect for, and I know you do as well. But it wasn't until today that I realized he's the reason you're with the company. So do you want to share, who were your champions, Manita? That's my first question. I want to ask you about your time at Florida Power as well.
Okay. So first of all, Richard's skiing this week, so he's probably not listening to this. So.
Yeah.
So when I was at Florida Power, I was a part of a utility association. And so individuals who did or managed projects similar to myself from other utilities, we were all together once a month discussing policy and regulations and strategy on how to comply with the regulations and develop programs. And we were working on large projects and I was starting to work a bit more with consultants. And from that, I mentioned to a few people that, well, I'll just say Karen Zwolak, she's married to Richard, started asking her about, what they were doing at Golder and how that consulting world worked. And several weeks later, I got a phone call from Richard, or from Karen while I was driving. Actually, I was in Tallahassee, asking if I wanted to apply because they were looking for someone to manage some large projects, and would I be interested in going to Golder. Now, the interesting thing about that is Golder, but not Richard Zwolak, others at Golder were working with me on licensing a project at the time. So they would come into the room and talk about their travels and all the things they were doing with these other clients and how great life was. So I actually was looking forward to thinking about moving to consultancy. And when I left, it was told to me that that's a tough world and you'll probably be there 5 years. And it's 20, going on 21 now. So.
Wow. Wow. I wanted you to share that story because I think it's not only important for the student viewers to hear, but sometimes the team members that are in the companies or with state agencies who might think either that they're stuck in a place or they're not confident about taking the risk. You are yet another example of women we've had on the show who are willing to take the risk and willing to be out of their comfort zone to cross that industry sector. And, it's your career with the state, with the private sector, and now with Golder that I think serves as an example of you can be good at everything you do, but it's really important to be good at what you do for others to recognize you, right? Because as great as Richard is and Mrs. Wolak, that's not an opportunity they extend to just anyone, right? So they must have been watching your work, as others in the old Florida Power Corporation would have done as well. So it's really important to be very good at what you're doing at the current time, right?
So I think that is very important, but it's also very important to be honest with yourself and have honest conversations with individuals you trust. And most of the opportunities that I've gotten were as a result of someone offering that. Now, Golder, I'm sure I thought about it long and hard, but even switching over to permitting, my initial thought was no, that sounds boring. After a long, thoughtful process, I moved over to permitting. While coming to Golder, being offered a job as operations manager, that's a totally different field. That's not technical, but that's managing people, that's managing budgets, that's managing a group of individuals and making sure that you have a profitable office. I said no 3 times to that as well. Had I not done that, I probably would not be power sector leader. So One of the things I do tell the students that I work with is to before you say no, to really think long and hard about what that opportunity could potentially bring to your skill set and step out and try it because you never know what might happen.
Sarah, step out of your comfort zone and get and do really well as you certainly did today. So there's that. Reminds me of another personal story you and I have discussed, Manita. You have a mentee that recently was recognized at a national level by an appointment. So do you want to talk about her and give her a shout out?
Yes. So I work with a youth program, which I've been involved for about 25 years. And our students go off and do great things. And we try to stay in touch because we celebrate their successes. And one of them is working for the Department of State. And I heard through several sources that she was involved in the integration team, the Biden-Harris integration team. And I had not talked to her, but the night of, I guess, the inauguration.
Inaugural night, yeah.
Yeah, so we were watching, and Biden was swearing in these 3 monitors of all these little squares. Right. So I texted her and I said, hey, just checking, hadn't heard from you. I don't know what your position will be, but are you by any chance one of these squares? Kind of as a joke. And she said, yes, Miss Manita, I am. And I literally almost lost it. So yes, she got sworn in. She is now working over operations at the United Nations in New York. And I can't wait to go and see her and take our students so they can see some of the work that she's doing as well. Yeah.
Right. That's absolutely right. And letting them see themselves in her, right? And
Yeah, so
providing that career advancement for her was probably more impactful than you realize and then she realizes, right? Because others will watch what you did for her and hopefully pay it forward, and hopefully she will pay it forward. So
yeah, I think as women leaders, we sometimes don't realize how much they're watching us because they certainly aren't going to tell us. And certainly when we're trying to pour into them, they don't necessarily let you know they've even consumed what you're pouring in. But a lot of times you hear years later, which is always great to hear, that time you told me X, I really listened to that. So
absolutely. So I'll ask this last question of you, although you've filled the room with advice and great counsel for our viewers, but I always end the show with a question about what advice would you give to that second year college student looking for a career in energy?
So one of the pieces of advice I'm trying to offer now is for students to develop a career plan and make sure you look at all of the options and opportunities available in that career you're pursuing, not just the front office or not just that first or second level of individual that you see, but still do some research. But mostly what I'm saying is, but be ready to pivot. Be ready to make a change and do something different if the opportunity comes your way. Don't be so hard and fast, thinking that I want to do X because Y and Z may come along and that may be a better opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And so that's one. And then trying to make sure that some of the students take some time to learn themselves and not necessarily pursue an opportunity because it's what they said they were going to do since 7th grade, because by the time they're in college, you know, their self, they actually have other needs or want to pursue another area, and trying to offer that advice as well, but mainly being flexible and paying attention to what's around and taking advantage of opportunities.
It's wonderful. Sage advice. Manita, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for your friendship, for your leadership in the industry. You're a gem and a leader in everything that you do. And I hope to see you at the forum again this year. So the forum will be October 27th through the 29th in Orlando. We're going in person this year. So if you have viewers, if you have an opportunity to take the vaccine and join us in Orlando on October 27th. Sarah, great job.
Thank you. And thank you, Manita. It was great speaking with you today. And thank you for everything that you do.
Well, thank you. And great job, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lila.
See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.